Alright, so after a lot of trial and error, I finally figured out what stream settings work if you're running a not i7 processor. I watched a lot of videos talking about the stream settings for Overwatch. Oh, do this, run this, do that. Nothing worked. It was either maxing out my CPU or it was just completely messing up my ping. Everything was crazy. But I sat down, I took the time, I did the research. Now I'm going to have to disclaimer, if you have a different CPU, you may have to tweak some of these settings. But for the most part, if you're not running an i7, because I don't know what an i7 is like, I have an i5. If you're not running an i7 processor, this is probably going to be the way you want to go with it. So let's get this shit started. Alright, so where we started out at is the typical X264 2500 bitrate that everybody recommends. My video settings were scaled down to 720p, 60 frames per second. Now the thing about X264 is if you have an i7, you might have the processor to do it with, but if you don't, this is what you get. Watching my cam, which is the software I use to pay attention to my hardware, my CPU immediately jumped up to 100% and basically meant that the CPU couldn't keep up with the stream. So I knew right off the bat that everybody that recommends this setting probably has an i7 that can handle this crazy kind of CPU load. But if you only have a quad-core processor, it's not going to work for you. Maybe if you have a 6-core or more than that, it might work. So it's worth a try. But if you have a quad-core, I don't recommend this at all. Now this is where I started messing with some of the settings in OBS, like to try and lower the CPU rate. I tried lowering my frame rate because I have a 144 Hz monitor, so I want to get 144 frames per second. But as you can see, even though it's not quite as bad, it still looks terrible. Yeah, no matter what I did, I was still just putting way too much stress on the processor. And even then, even if it was limited frame rate, there was still a lot of skips in the frame rate. I guess just from where the processor was jumping up to 100%. So I kind of eventually came to the conclusion that for quad-core processors, you just can't do the encoding. This is where I turned the frames per second down. And as you can see, it looks okay, but I could still tell stuttering when I was playing outside of like how bad it just looks in the video. Alright, so this is after I figured out all the trial and error. This is where I got to. And granted, disclaimer that this is downloaded from my YouTube stream, so the quality live was actually a little bit better, but even just in Sony Vegas, this looks pretty good to me. This was live stream quality with a quad-core CPU, and I have a GTX 1070, so I know I have a lot of power as far as my graphics card goes. But I'm going to show you guys what I did to get this to work on OBS. Okay, what you want to do, change it to the NVENC H264 setting. 10,000 bitrate. What I found with the bitrate was it seems like it only goes like I think it's an internet type thing, honestly, but I'm not sure. But it seemed like no matter how high I set it, the only thing it did was make the stream better. Like it didn't seem like at the bottom right of OBS it tells you what your bitrate you're getting is, and it would get so high, like I could get like 5,000 or something like that. But limiting it to 2,500 only seemed to make my stream worse and seemed to not really affect my hardware at all. So I just put it on 10,000 and it made it look as good as it does. So I recommend doing that, and then you can run 60 frames per second as long as you have a good beefy graphics card. But the 264 running it on your graphics card seems to be the way to go unless you have a really badass processor. I think the key is you have to know whether or not, like if you are maxing out your graphics card while you're playing, then but not your CPU, then you should stream with your CPU. But if you're like me and your CPU is really stressed out because you've only got a quad core, but your graphics card isn't, you still got plenty of room to work there, definitely use the graphics card encoder. Don't let these other guys tell you, oh, always use X264, always, because they have i7s. They have these big streaming studio type processors, but not everybody does. You can still get great quality by using the hardware encoder on your graphics card rather than using the processor encoder. So I hope this helps people out. I did play a full game with this, and I didn't experience, the FPS was a little bit less. It was like 130, 120 sometimes, which is expected, but it was still 100% playable considering I was streaming, and I didn't experience anything crazy, no crazy ping or anything like that. So good luck with it, and leave a comment if I'm wrong about anything, or if you have some tips maybe for me if you know more than I do, and I'd really appreciate it because it just helps me out. Thank you.